contains most of the procedural rules that apply in our courts. It relates to the rights of suspects, the rights of arrested persons, the rights of accused persons. The duties and powers of the police, especially in the course of the investigation. Now, here we are talking about the powers of the police in respect of arrest, search, and interrogation. Now, there are rules around which the police need to operate when they arrest and when they search and when they interrogate. When they arrest somebody, whether they use force or they simply, it's a simple arrest which does not involve force. When they search your premises, looking for evidence, when they interrogate a suspect, all these, most of these are contained within the Criminal Procedure Act. Other issues that are dealt with in the context of the Criminal Procedure Act are pre-trial procedural matters. Again, this relates to arrest, legal representation, bail, and so on and so forth. And when you go further, now we are in the realm of the courts. An accused who, I think you might have heard in the news this morning, and I'm going to make it as practical as possible. It has nothing to do with my political inclinations or anything of the sort. But I'll cite the case of the former Speaker of the National Assembly. You would have heard, and I heard, for example, in the news, the lawyer of the accused intimating that they had been shown the charge sheet. Now, the accused. Now, now here I'm talking about the former national speaker appears in the district court. Oh no, I think it's actually the regional court. Now it's a lower court, so a charge sheet was prepared. That is why the lawyer intimated in the news that we were shown a charge sheet. Had they been appearing in the High Court, an indictment would have been presented to them. Now, other than that, going further, after the accused has been presented with a charge sheet, and they already know the charges that they are facing, the pleading process, pleading process also operates within the context of the Criminal Procedure Act, Section 112, Section 115, and so on and so forth. Section 112 would be the instance where the accused pleads guilty. It's got its own dynamics as well. Section 113, Section 115. This is where the accused pleads not guilty. And then we'll also go to the course of the criminal trial, especially the duties of the prosecutor, the duties of the magistrate or the presiding officer within the context of the trial. This is where we talk, for example, about the rules pertaining to, let's talk about, for example, your presiding officer. Your presiding officer has to be fair to the accused, allow the accused to present their case in a fair manner. They have to be unbiased, and so on and so forth. The prosecutor, the same applies to the prosecutor. The prosecutor also has got certain rights. The prosecutor can bring up certain applications. For example, the prosecutor has the power to join accused persons, and so on and so forth. And after the trial has proceeded, you come to the verdict. Now, all this takes place within the ambit of the criminal justice system. The verdict. This is where the court comes to the conclusion after hearing the evidence. Is the accused guilty, or is the accused not guilty? If the accused is found guilty, comes the sentencing part, or the sentence. The magistrate also operates within certain confines. The judge operates within certain confines. You've heard of the Minimum Sentences Act, for example. After the sentence has been done and dusted with, there are also post-trial remedies, your appeal, your review, and also your executive action. For example, a person may ask for mercy from the state president. They may ask for a free pardon. They may ask to be indemnified, and so on and so forth. Now, lastly, the rules of criminal procedure are not only sourced from the Criminal Procedure Act. Some of them emanate from the common law. And other than the Criminal Procedure Act, other legislation as well. Where, for example, when you deal with a child of a certain age, below the ages of 18 and so forth, the Child Justice Act comes into place. Children of a particular age are no longer dealt with according to the procedures of the Criminal Procedure Act. They are dealt with in terms of the Child Justice Act. Now, moving further, ladies and gentlemen, where does criminal procedure find itself within the ambit of the criminal justice system? A distinction must also be made between what is called substantive law and procedural law. Now, the distinction between substantive law and procedural law or adjectival law is important to grasp at this early stage. I know that most of you already intrinsically know of the distinction or are aware of the distinction. You might, however, still not be conversant with the finer points surrounding these aspects. In general, substantive law comprises legal rules which determine, now I'm talking about substantive law in general. These are legal rules which determine the rights and duties of the individual and the state. Now, substantive law, or let me rather say criminal law, forms part of substantive law. Criminal law forms part of substantive law. In your textbook, they talk about substantive criminal law, but I would prefer to separate them in this way. Criminal law forms part of substantive law. Now, in the context of substantive criminal law, criminal law essentially determines which actions or omissions are regarded as crime. For example, if a person is arrested of committing fraud, the charge sheet is framed in a particular way. There are certain elements, definitional elements, that the state needs to prove in order for us to be able to say at the end of the trial that the accused or the state has proved its case beyond a reasonable doubt. There has to be, in the case of fraud, for example, there has to be a misrepresentation made by the accused to a particular person. And the person to whom the misrepresentation has been made must act to their own detriment. Now, that is criminal law. That is substantive law. As I've already indicated, substantive law determines the requirements to be met as far as a particular crime or a particular offense is concerned. These are also, Snyman now defines them as definitional elements. I've already referred to these. Now, substantive law operates in contradistinction to procedural law or adjectival law. Now, these are rules of procedure. These are rules of procedure. Rules of procedure that entail rules of evidence and rules of criminal procedure. Now, what are these? I've already alluded to this above. These are, for example, the rules which determine the circumstances under which a person may be arrested, the procedures that are to be followed when a person is arrested, the procedure that is followed in conducting a search, the procedure that is followed in court, the procedure that is followed in granting bail, either at the pre-trial stage or during the court proceedings, the procedure that is followed during the trial as it relates to who testifies first, who has the right to cross-examine, under which rules does this operate, and so on and so forth. Now, these are the rules of criminal procedure falling under what is called adjectival law. I've already alluded to this. These are different procedures, procedures pertaining to bail, trial, even appeal and review. Now, as you might or might not know, but I suspect most of you are already aware of this at this point of your studies, the Constitution of the Republic is regarded as the supreme law of the land. Now, being the supreme law of the land, it consists also of the Bill of Rights. Now, there is usually confusion from what we're listening to people speak. There is usually a confusion pertaining to the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. But I suspect most of you might already know what the distinction is. But I'll mention it at any rate. Now, we have the Constitution, which has got different provisions. Now, different provisions, and it's also got different chapters as well. There is a chapter dealing specifically with the Bill of Rights. These are particularly individual rights that need to be protected. Individual rights of a person that should be protected. That is what essentially encompasses the Bill of Rights. Now, every law, every regulation must be interpreted in the context of the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. Now, any law which is in conflict with the Bill of Rights is unconstitutional and it must be reviewed. For example, in terms of Section 35 of the Constitution, there are important requirements for ensuring the right to a fair trial. Now, if you read through Section 35, it relates to what needs to happen when a person has been arrested. What rights do they enjoy? They enjoy the right to remain silent. They enjoy the right to be presumed innocent, the right to have a lawyer present, and so on and so forth. There are numerous rights that a person enjoys in the Bill of Rights. But obviously, you are also aware of Section 36, the limitation clause. None of these rights are absolute. Now we come to one of the rights encapsulated in the Bill of Rights, the presumption of innocence. Basically, every accused person remains innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. Now, there is no burden on the accused. Now, when I start mentioning the burden, it takes you now back to the laws of evidence, even though it's a procedural rule as well. There is no burden on the accused to prove their innocence. What does this mean? It means that when an accused appears before a court of law, the state bears the burden of proving everything. The accused might come to court and say, I choose to remain silent. Now, the presumption of innocence goes hand in hand with the right to remain silent. If an accused chooses to remain silent, then the state or the prosecution must prove every element of the offense. Now, the example that I usually employ in this regard is that of a lady who walks into a famous shopping store where they sell clothes and all sorts of paraphernalia. She goes into the store and she decides to steal a beautiful dress off the rails. Now she's very clever. She removes the price tag, which is the only identifying sign of this item belonging to the shop. Now, on her way out of the shop, she's accosted by the security guard, who realizes that the bag of the accused is now bulging. It's not the same size that it was when she came in. Arrests the accused, but the accused tells the security guard, even on arrest, this is my own dress. I brought it in. If we assume for a moment, for the sake of this discussion, if we assume that there are no cameras in that store, there's no way that anyone could have noticed the lady stealing the item. When it comes to the trial, and the lady, the accused, says to the court, I came in with this garment. I did not steal it. It belongs to me. But where we start, remember, this lady has got the right to remain silent. She might even go to court and say, look, I exercise my right to remain silent. I'm not going to say anything. Now, our law says that no adverse inference may be drawn against the accused for exercising the right to remain silent. What does this mean? The court cannot say in the end, the state cannot argue, your worship, your lordship, this lady was accosted in possession of a dress that looks identical to the ones that we have in the shop. She's choosing to remain silent. This means that she's guilty. No such inference can be made by the court. The court can only make a conclusion based on the whole conspectus of the evidence that is presented before the court. Meaning that the accused can simply remain silent. But if the accused, for example, chooses to say, look, this is my own, it is the prerogative of the accused to say, look, to tender an explanation if they so wish. But if the accused chooses not to say anything, you cannot draw an inference that silence means guilt. Now I just need to explain the content of the presumption of innocence a little bit further. The accused remains innocent until proven guilty. The standard of proof, the burden of proof on the state is to prove its case beyond any reasonable doubt. The standard of proof is not what you see on American shows where the prosecutor says, I'm going to prove the case against the accused beyond the shadow of a doubt. That is a very high standard, and I don't think many people would actually live up to that standard. But the standard of proof that is required in most of the common law countries to which we belong is proof beyond any reasonable doubt. The burden of proof, as I've already intimated above, always rests with the state. The accused need not say anything. Now, you do find instances, for example, where the accused is said to have acted immorally, for example. Here we are talking about the clash between legal guilt and moral guilt. Now, the accused must also always be convicted in terms of the principles of legality. What are the principles of legality? The principles of legality in this instance intimate that the accused must be convicted in terms of existing law, in terms of fair rules. We cannot, for example, go around making rules as it suits us. If, for example, the example that I usually give is the following. If the accused is, for example, let's say the killing of chickens is not a crime, but the accused goes on a killing spree of chickens. And when we look at it, it's morally and ethically reprehensible, because if he goes around doing this, chickens not belonging to anyone for the sake of the argument, but he's killing them anyway. There is no rule, there is no law that says that the accused cannot do that. But people feel morally and ethically, but the accused cannot, or the suspect cannot go around doing this. You cannot simply go around or start or make a new rule on the spot and say that, yeah, no, because it's morally and ethically reprehensible, then we are going to charge the accused. The accused must be convicted by a competent court, not a kangaroo court, a competent court, a court that is established in terms of legislation, in terms of the Constitution, in terms of the rules of fairness. The court must also make an objective finding at the end of it all. The court must make an objective finding. What is an objective finding? An objective finding is one that is based on the evidence that is presented before court. The court cannot, let me give you the following example. The court cannot, for example, know of, let's say the accused is brought before court of having committed the crime of a robbery. Let us say that the magistrate or the judge was there during the robbery. They did actually see the accused commit the offense. Now, but there is no evidence before this court. There is no evidence before this court that the accused committed the offense. But the judge makes a finding based on evidence that is not before this court. We might even stretch it further. Maybe the wife of the judge or the wife of the magistrate actually witnessed the whole thing and says, the evidence that is presented in your court is not sufficient, but I saw this man. He was wearing this, that, and the other, and he's got this and that scratch, but the witnesses cannot identify those. The court cannot make a finding based on that. It must be an objective finding which is based on the evidence that is presented before the court, and it's based on the law and the Constitution. Now, coming to inquisitorial and accusatorial procedure. The accusatorial procedure, South Africa ascribes to the accusatorial procedure. Well, that is what we are told anyway. But if you look at our, let me not complicate it. It's something that I can mention later on, or if you feel the need for me to explain why it's not that simple, I'm more than willing to explain. But when it comes to the accusatorial procedure, or the process, or the adversarial procedure, the presiding officer plays a passive role. The presiding officer is a referee sitting between two contestants. The prosecutor is Dominus Litis, the master of the proceedings, procedure. The accusatorial procedure, South Africa ascribes to the accusatorial procedure. Well, that is what we are told anyway. But if you look at our, let me not complicate it. It's something that I can mention later on, or if you feel the need for me to explain why it's not that simple, I'm more than willing to explain. But when it comes to the accusatorial procedure, or the process, or the adversarial procedure, the presiding officer plays a passive role. The presiding officer is a referee sitting between two contestants. The prosecutor is Dominus Litis, the master of the proceedings. The prosecutor must produce the evidence that is required to prove the case beyond a reasonable doubt. But the prosecutor essentially is in charge of the two inquisitorial and accusatorial procedure. The accusatorial procedure, South Africa ascribes to the accusatorial procedure. Well, that is what we are told anyway. But if you look at our, let me not complicate it. It's something that I can mention later on, or if you feel the need for me to explain why it's not that simple, I'm more than willing to explain. But when it comes to the accusatorial procedure, or the process, or the adversarial procedure, the presiding officer plays a passive role. The presiding officer is a referee sitting between two contestants. The prosecutor is Dominus Litis, the master of the proceedings. The prosecutor must produce the evidence that is required to prove the case beyond a reasonable doubt. But the prosecutor essentially is in charge of the case. The magistrate, the presiding officer, the judge plays the passive role of a referee. In the inquisitorial procedure, however, the presiding officer is essentially regarded as Dominus Litis, and they actually play an active role in the proceedings. Now, within the inquisitorial procedure, the judge, or you actually have a presiding judge and an investigating judge. That is a system. The most notable example is in France, where the investigation instead of being actually led by the investigating officer himself, it's actually led by a judge. The judge compiles what is called a dossier. If somebody comes with an allegation, they set up a dossier in terms of which they start to, they invite witnesses from either side of the divide, from the complainant and the accused. They take evidence and they put it down in writing. Remember, they take down evidence from both sides. The accused is invited. Come, tell us your side of the story. The complainant comes. And based on that, the investigating judge will decide whether this matter is actually strong enough, or there is enough, or whether there's enough evidence for this matter to go to trial. And if they decide that there is no evidence upon which to prosecute the accused, that would be the end of the matter. But if they do decide, then it's taken to a higher level, to another judge who will conduct the trial. The trial, the manner in which it is conducted, the judge in the proceedings plays a much more pronounced role, a much more active role. The judge, unlike in I got muted because somebody, I think, put on their camera or something. I don't know.
Okay, doctor. I wanted to tell you that you are muted, Dr. T. It's okay. Thank you.
Oh, okay. Now I've lost my presentation somehow. what is going on.
Dr. Mokoena, we are able to see your presentation.
I'm not able to see it from my side.
Oh, okay. Maybe you can stop sharing and then share again.
Yeah, well, it has stopped sharing on its own.
However, we still can see. Oh, Dr. Mokoena.
You can't see.
I think if you log out and then log in again.
Can I ask you please to keep your cameras off? Let's just make it simple so that we finish as early as possible. Okay, I think I've explained enough on the vagaries of the inquisitorial and the accusatorial system. Can you see my screen now, ladies and gentlemen?
Yes.
Okay. Now we go to the courts. The courts which operate in the Republic. We have our, except for constitutional matters, appeals of a superior the court. The courts which operate in the Republic. We have our lower courts and we have our superior courts. Now, as far as our courts are concerned, as I've intimated, we have. As far as superior courts are concerned, the Constitutional Court is the highest court of appeal in respect of constitutional. The Supreme Court of Appeals sits only as a court of appeal. It is, however, a court of appeal in respect of any matter except of appeal. It is, however, a court of appeal in respect of any matter except for constitutional matters. What does this mean? If somebody goes to a high court, a normal high court, and they are not happy with the outcome, and then they appeal to the Supreme Court of Appeals, the Supreme Court of Appeals rules against them. They still have recourse to the Constitutional Court if it's a constitutional matter. The Constitutional Court has absolute or final authority as far as constitutional matters are concerned. High courts in general have jurisdiction in respect of all offenses. They also have appellate jurisdiction. What is appellate jurisdiction? Other courts can appeal to them in respect of cases where there is a matter was heard by a single judge. Also in respect of matters that were heard in the lower courts. The lower courts, your magistrates' courts, your regional courts, they have no powers of review and appeal. Listen to this very carefully. Your lower courts, they have no powers of review and appeal. Listen very carefully. However, In terms of the Traditional Courts Act, the Traditional Courts Act has recently been promulgated, but apparently it's not yet in force from what I hear, because they are still finalizing the regulations. But in terms of the Traditional Courts Act, which I've gone through, a matter that is brought before the traditional courts, a traditional court, can be reviewed by a lower court. It's a very strange one, but that's what the Traditional Courts Act says. Remember, the traditional courts is in force, from what I hear, because we didn't have a high court in Mpumalanga. We didn't have a high court in Limpopo. So the judge president for those areas was the judge president sitting in the North Gauteng High Court. And from time to time, they would say, in order to make justice accessible to the people in Limpopo, to the people in Mpumalanga, they would set up a court in a particular building. Sometimes they would do it in a magistrate's court, or in a particular building where that court would sit as a high court. In a particular building. Sometimes they would do it in a magistrate's court, or in a particular building where that court would sit as a high court to hear cases from a particular area. Those were circuit courts. But now we do have a high court in Mpumalanga. We do have a high court in Limpopo. Courts are allocated according to their status. Remember, I've referred to superior courts and lower courts. Our superior courts, if I can just give you a recap, our superior courts include the Constitutional Court, the Supreme Court of Appeals, and the High Court. Our lower courts are the Regional Court and the Magistrates Court, or the District Court. Now, jurisdiction in respect of offenses. In general, South African courts have the jurisdiction to hear offenses that are committed within the borders of the Republic. Now, where jurisdiction is unclear, you will note in your textbook, I can't remember which page it is, but in your textbook, they refer to the 4-kilometer rule. The 4-kilometer rule operates in terms of the Magistrates Court Act. I think it's Section 93 of the Magistrates Court Act, where the jurisdiction is not very clear. Remember, for a court to have jurisdiction, if, for example, I'm in Pretoria, I'm in Mamelodi, and the offense is committed in Mamelodi, then the terms of reference are very clear. The matter has to be heard in Mamelodi. But if, for example, I commit an offense, I'm now referring to the 4-kilometer rule. I commit an offense between Mamelodi and, say, Cullinan. The 4-kilometer rule operates. If the offense was committed, say, 4 kilometers over the border of Cullinan, then it would be heard in Cullinan. If it's 4 kilometers within the border of Mamelodi, then it would be Mamelodi. Now, there is also the overlapping of offenses as far as jurisdiction is concerned. If, for example, somebody steals something, the overlapping of offenses applies in particular only to certain offenses. Offenses such as kidnapping, offenses such as fraud, theft, and so on and so forth. Theft is a very notable example, and the most simple example that you can find, in the sense that if somebody steals something from Cape Town and they ferry the item over several jurisdictions. They still, from Cape Town, they ferry the object through the Eastern Cape, through the Northern Cape, and they end up in Gauteng. It might need to be determined where the matter needs to be heard. Section 111 of the Criminal Procedure Act grants the DPP the authority to determine the jurisdiction within which such a matter would be heard. And what determines the discretion of the DPP in this regard? The DPP would look. Let's say, for example, somebody is arrested of. Let me give the same example. It's kidnapping and theft. They stole money in Cape Town. They ran over to the Eastern Cape where they kidnapped a child. And then they went with that child through to the Northern Cape, through the Free State, through KwaZulu-Natal, and so on and so forth. And in those provinces, they happen to commit other offenses as well. It might need to be determined where is the matter going to be heard. For practical purposes, the DPP might decide on Cape Town. They might decide on the Northern Cape. They might decide on the place where the accused was subsequently arrested. What do I mean by practical purposes? The DPP might look, for example, at the expense that would be incurred if we are going to say let's separate the dockets. Remember, the person stole in Cape Town, committed a crime in the Northern Cape. They went through to the Eastern Cape, to the Free State, to KwaZulu-Natal. They ended up in Gauteng. In all those provinces, there is a docket that was opened. Now, if we are to say that the accused has to stand trial in each and every one of those provinces, the expense would be immense. Remember, you have witnesses that would need to be ferried from all those areas. So the DPP might decide, let's do it in one place. Let's do it in one place. I think the mistake I made here was to say...
Dr. T.
Yeah, boo.
Onaru are not audible enough, they can't hear anything.
I don't know because I'm screaming my lungs out. I don't know.
Yeah, with me, I can hear you loud and clear. I don't know what experience.
I can also hear loud and clear. I think it's their own network.
Yeah, maybe they are microphones. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you for that. Now the DPP might decide. The matter will be heard in Gauteng. The witnesses will all gather in one place for practical purposes, which means that the witnesses will all be ferried to one place when the trial is ready. Also for logistical purposes, can you imagine if the accused has to be ferried from one province to another to hear a case? I mean, we've heard of instances where accused escape and so on and so forth. Now, the courts also enjoy jurisdiction in respect of offenses. And as I indicated in the earlier slide where I said jurisdiction is allocated according to status. Now, if we look at this one, the high courts have unlimited jurisdiction as far as offenses are concerned, and you will see that in your textbook as well. Regional courts, they also have the jurisdiction to hear all offenses except for high treason. The district courts or the magistrate court may not hear They can hear every other offense, but obviously they cannot hear rape and murder. They cannot hear high treason, and so on and so forth. So this is how our jurisdiction hierarchically is organized as far as the jurisdiction of offenses is concerned. Jurisdiction in respect of sentencing. The high courts, their jurisdiction is unlimited. The regional courts, they can sentence an accused to a maximum of 15 years per charge. 15 years per charge. If the accused is charged of murder, rape, theft of a motor vehicle, the court can impose a sentence of 15 years in respect of each of those offenses. Your district courts or magistrates court, the maximum sentence that they can impose is 3 years per charge. I'm not going to refer to issues pertaining to the fines and so on. You will find that in your textbook. The prosecution of offenses. When it comes to the prosecution of offenses, I would like you to take particular note of the following aspects that are discussed in Chapter 3 of your textbook. Now, Chapter 3 essentially discusses the infrastructure of the prosecutorial system that we have. Section 179 of the Constitution says that we have a single prosecutorial authority. Public prosecutions are prosecuted under the National Prosecuting Authority. The National Prosecuting Authority is headed by the National Director of Public Prosecutions. Currently, it's Ms. Shamila Batohi. Just beneath her, you find National Deputy. It was actually supposed to read DNDPPs. I think there are about 5 of them. Deputies under the National Director of Public Prosecutions. And then you have DPPs, Directors of Public Prosecutions. In every prosecutorial jurisdiction, in what do they call them? The term has lost me, but it will come back. In every, they are not called regions, but they are called. I'll come back to it. And then you have, but just underneath your DPPs, something that I forgot, no. Just under your DPPs, you also have your chief prosecutors. And then you have your senior prosecutors. And then we are also going to discuss private prosecutions. And private prosecutions occur under Section 7 of the Criminal Procedure Act. There are also private prosecutions that take place under Section 8 of the Criminal Procedure Act. You must be able to make a distinction between Section 7 and Section 8. And also the personnel that have the authority to prosecute private prosecutions. The prosecutor is regarded as dominus litis. Dominus litis is just a fancy way of saying that they are the master of the case. They control their case that is brought before them. They are responsible for the state's case. When a person goes to a police station and they lay a charge, the person who lays the charge, the complainant, is not in charge of that case. The person who is in charge of it and who is responsible for it is the prosecutor. They have the power to formulate cases or charges, and also to consolidate the charges. They have the power to determine the accused numerical order. They have the right and the authority to close the state's case. Now, let me go to the middle one, to determine the accused numerical order. Now, the common myth that does the rounds is that when somebody is referred to as accused number one, then accused number one is the main character in the whole scenario. The role that they play in the commission of the crime is supposed to be the most pronounced. If you have, say, 3 accused persons, if you have 5 accused persons, if somebody is referred to as accused number one, then most people would say, yeah, that's the main guy. He's accused number one. I remember a few years ago, the state president referred to the ruling party as being accused number one in this, that, and the other. I think you might remember that. And he said accused number one. When he said accused number one, the implication is that it is the main culprit, the main character in whatever he was saying. I'm just using that as an example, just to show you how this myth has gained currency. That if you are accused number one, then you are the main character. But that is not necessarily the case. What happens is, usually when the docket is written down, the person who comes in first and their name is noted down, their address and so on and so forth, will become the first person on the charge sheet usually. And the second person, the third person, and so on and so forth. So that does not make them the main character in the commission of the offense. So if you hear somebody say, yeah, accused number one, then that's the main guy. No, it's not. It's not always the case. It might well be, but that's not necessarily so. Prosecutorial discretion. The prosecutor has a discretion to prosecute. Remember, in South Africa, we do not have a system of general prosecutions, should I say. They do have it in other countries, particularly in the inquisitorial world, where once a case is opened, the prosecutor has got a duty to investigate and to prosecute. Now, the discretion to prosecute is determined by a number of factors. The prosecutor might, for example, look at whether the state has got a prima facie case. A prima facie case is a case upon which there are reasonable prospects. This is just one of the ways in which it is defined. A prima facie case is defined. So don't hold me to this definition of what a prima facie case. It is a very nebulous concept. But for the purposes of this session, a prima facie case is a case upon which there are reasonable prospects of a success as far as the prosecution is concerned. The prosecutor might look at the age of the deceased, of the accused, the accused, if I can just give you an example, the accused is 80 years old. They go into a supermarket and they steal a bar of chocolate. And they are arrested, and the prosecutor has to decide. They look at the age of the accused. I mean, this gentleman is 80 years old. Will it serve any purpose? You also look at the value. And look, when I say value, I use this term very loosely. Value might subjectively to the owner of the supermarket might the value of a bar of chocolate might be very high in the greater scheme of things, but objectively, you and I looking at it might say, yeah, but a bar of chocolate costs 8 rand. This old man is 80 years old. Is it really necessary? Is it really efficacious to prosecute this old man? The prosecutor might decide on those grounds. Sometimes there are crimes that are somewhat antiquated, that the prosecutor might decide not to prosecute on. I had something in mind, but it has slipped. But I'll remember as we go along, and then I'll try and relate it to you. De minimis non curat lex. This one applies in equal measure to what I mentioned pertaining to the issue of age. The prosecutor might decide, but this is a minor issue. We have bigger fish to fry. Let's not prosecute this person based on the crime that they're alleged to have committed, because it's something very minor according to the objective judgment of the prosecutor. Now, you must also be able to make a distinction between the withdrawal of a charge and the stopping of proceedings. The withdrawal of a charge and the stopping of proceedings. The withdrawal of a charge. Let me give you the following example. You might recall that the state, the case against the former president, Mr. Jacob Zuma, and Talis. It has been before our courts for many years. At some point, it was withdrawn. I don't know how many of you would be aware of it. It was withdrawn at some point. But then, if I use that example, then it will show you how a withdrawal operates in practice. What is a withdrawal? A case can only be withdrawn before the accused pleads. Now, when does the accused plead? Now, I think you've heard in the news many times where, I don't hear it a lot these days, but reporters used to say, and I couldn't for the life of me make out why they always say that. Because they would say, let's say in the example of the former national speaker, the national speaker appeared in court. It was a first appearance. She was not asked to plead. Now, a person is asked to plead at the stage when the state is ready to proceed to trial. Pleading means that the accused is asked, the charges are put to them. We charge you with, they say they are going to prefer 12 charges of whatever, fraud and corruption and whatnot. Do you plead guilty or not guilty? Before we get to that stage, where the charges are put to the accused. Remember, the accused cannot plead before the charges are put to them. But before we get to that stage, you cannot withdraw a case. The state cannot withdraw. So even in the case of Mr. Zuma and Talis, they had not pleaded. The case was just coming to court and there were issues around this, that, and the other, this piece of evidence. This person did not do this, that, and the other. And eventually it was withdrawn. But now, a case that has been withdrawn does not entitle the accused to an acquittal. Meaning, essentially, that the case may be reinstated, as in the case of Mr. Zuma. It was subsequently reinstated. For a case to be withdrawn, the permission of the DPP is not necessarily required. For a case to be withdrawn, you do not need, a prosecutor can do that on their own. Now, the stopping of a prosecution, it can only occur, remember, a withdrawal can only appear, these are direct opposites, you will see. The stopping of a prosecution can only occur after the accused has pleaded. The accused appears before court. Let me give you an example. The accused appears before court. They are charged with corruption, fraud, this, that, and the other. The state leads one witness. The witness comes to court and the witness testified, I saw this man stealing money and doing this, that, and the other. But now, let's say the witness testifies between 3 and 4 and the court adjourns. And then the matter is adjourned for another date on which the witness will proceed with their evidence. But the witness somehow disappears. And this is the star witness. Let's say this is the only witness. Or the witness dies. Ne? Such a case can be brought to court. And the court, the prosecution can apply for the stopping of the proceedings. The stopping of the proceedings does not, or actually entitles the accused to an acquittal, because evidence has already been heard, as my example depicts. Such a case may not be reinstated. The stopping of a prosecution needs the say-so of the DPP in order to proceed. You see, these are direct opposites. The stopping of the proceedings, then the withdrawal of a charge. Stopping of proceedings, not the stopping of the charge. The stopping of the proceedings, because the proceedings are already in play, and the withdrawal of a charge. Two sides of a coin. Now, the prosecutor, as I've already intimated, has got the right to, the prosecutor enjoys prosecutorial discretion. But the prosecutorial discretion may be limited by certain aspects. For example, the right to prosecute a person prescribes in certain instances. Section 18 of the Criminal Procedure Act says that the right to institute a prosecution for any offense lapses after the expiration of a period of 20 years from the time when the offense was committed. That is the general rule. If a period of 20 years has expired after the commission of the offense, the prosecutor cannot prosecute the accused. But there are exceptions to this rule. If you look at, I think it's on page 80 of your prescribed textbook, in respect of common law crimes, the following offenses do not prescribe: murder, high treason, robbery, child stealing. In respect of statutory crimes, your textbook refers to offenses in terms of the Rome Statute, and also offenses in terms of the prevention and combating of torture, of the torture of persons, Act 13 of 2013. Now, this refers to genocide, crimes against humanity, and war crimes. In terms of the sexual, or it's the so-called Sexual Offences Act, the crime of rape or compelled rape does not expire. The crime of the trafficking of persons for sexual purposes does not expire. The crime of using a mentally disabled child for pornographic purposes does not expire. So if you are given a question in the exam, usually what we do, we'll give you a scenario. This person goes to this area, commits an offense in 1980, and then they are arrested in the year 2000, after 20 years. Now, you must be able to, from the question that would have been asked, extrapolate from the facts. From the facts, I mean even the type of offense that the accused is alleged to have committed. You must be able to denote whether this falls within the ambit of offenses that do not expire in terms of Section 18 of the Criminal Procedure Act. Private prosecution. Now, what is private prosecution? I always assumed when doing classes of this sort that people necessarily understood the distinction between a private prosecution and a public prosecution. But I think I feel constrained to explain because I've received numerous queries from students asking to explain the simple distinction between a private prosecution and a public prosecution. Now, prosecutions that take place within the ambit of the NPA, the National Prosecuting Authority, are public prosecutions. Now, what is a private prosecution? I'm going to explain it later on in the notes. But as a general rule, the prosecution has the prerogative of instituting public prosecutions. However, if the NPA fails to prosecute or refuses to prosecute, private prosecution may be instituted by a private person. The types of private prosecution that may ensue are the following. Section 8 of the Criminal Procedure Act, private prosecution by statutory right. Which is this one? This is your private prosecution, for example, we actually have a constitutional court case where private prosecution was instituted by the NSPCA, then a National Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals. Basically, what was happening here was that a particular group, let's call them a religious group, were preparing to, in pursuance of a religious ceremony, slaughter certain animals within a certain suburb, neighborhood. And the neighbors took exception, contacted the authorities, and that is how the NPA got involved in it. The NPA did not prosecute, but the matter was actually relayed to the NSPCA. No, I'm lying, ladies and gentlemen. I'm lying. I think what happened initially was a charge was laid, but then instead of prosecuting, because the NSPCA has got the authority to institute a private prosecution by statutory right, the matter was now referred to the NSPCA, and it was prosecuted by the NSPCA, but it ended up in the Constitutional Court anyway. Section 7.1, individual prosecution. Okay, let me just go back to individual prosecution. Individual prosecution, this is where the NPA refuses to prosecute, declines to prosecute, and a private individual decides to prosecute. Now, this is a very, very expensive enterprise, private prosecution, and only people with very deep pockets are able to do it, because you have to pay for virtually everything. You have to pay for the building, you have to pay for the presiding officer, you have to pay if you need interpreters, and so on and so forth. The requirements for a private prosecution. Now, these are the requirements in terms of Section 7.1 of the Criminal Procedure Act, where a prosecutor declines to prosecute. They issue what is called a certificate nolle prosequi. No private prosecution may proceed without producing a certificate nolle prosequi. What is a certificate nolle prosequi? A certificate nolle prosequi is certification or represents certification by the DPP purporting. Now, this is what they are saying in the nolle prosequi, that he has, or he or she, I'll use a he for now, he has examined the statements in the case docket and he declines to prosecute. Now, they'll probably give reasons why they are declining to prosecute. There are no prospects of a successful prosecution. That would normally be the standard reason why the prosecutor would decline to prosecute. Locus standi to prosecute. These are now the standard requirements for a private prosecution. The person who institutes a private prosecution must have locus standi to do so. They must have what is locus standi, by the way? They must have the I don't want to say authority. Authority is too strong a term. But they must have the standing. Let's just say the standing. They must have the standing, or they must have the right to institute a private prosecution. Not everybody has got this right. In terms of Section 7.1 of the Criminal Procedure Act. Yeah, I see somebody. Somebody has come to my rescue there. Capacity. Capacity, I don't know. Yeah, but capacity sounds just about. To the accusatorial procedure or the process or the adversarial procedure, the presiding officer plays a passive role. The presiding officer is a referee sitting between two contestants. The prosecutor is Dominus Litis, the master of the proceedings. The prosecutor must produce the evidence that is required to prove the case beyond a reasonable doubt. But the prosecutor essentially is in charge of the case. The magistrate, the presiding officer, the judge plays the passive role of a referee. In the inquisitorial procedure, however, the presiding officer is essentially regarded as Dominus Litis, and they actually play an active role in the proceedings. Now, within the inquisitorial procedure, the judge, or you actually have a presiding judge and an investigating judge. That is a system. The most notable example is in France, where the investigation instead of being actually led by the investigating officer himself, it's actually led by a judge. The judge compiles what is called a dossier. If somebody comes with an allegation, they set up a dossier in terms of which they start to they invite witnesses from either side of the divide, from the complainant and the accused. They take evidence and they put it down in writing. Remember, they take down evidence from both sides. The accused is invited. Come, tell us your side of the story. The complainant comes. And based on that, the investigating judge will decide whether this matter is actually strong enough, or there is enough, or whether there's enough evidence for this matter to go to trial. And if they decide that there is no evidence upon which to prosecute the accused, that would be the end of the matter. But if they do decide, then it's taken to a higher level, to another judge, will conduct the trial. The trial, the manner in which it is conducted, the judge in the proceedings plays a much more pronounced role, a much more active role. The judge, unlike in yeah, I got muted because somebody, I think, put on their camera or something. I don't know.
Okay, doctor. I wanted to tell you that you are muted, Dr. T. It's okay. Thank you.
Oh, okay. Now I've lost my presentation somehow.